AI, artificial intelligence. There has been so much buzz about this for the last 6 months. It is difficult to keep up, but I think we can really make some headway into insight on what is AI, what's all the buzz about, what we can expect, what are the threats, what are the benefits. We're going to try and cover the waterfront on this with two great speakers. Our veteran technologist, John Dabels. John is a member of TBE. If you recall, 4 or 5 months ago, we did a program with John on electric vehicles, EVs. It was a big hit. John did a great job. He stays plugged in and up to date on so many things that affect all of our daily lives. And with John is Rabbi Beth Nichols, TBE's Director of Lifelong Jewish Learning. And you say, well, Jewish learning and AI. I think you're going to be surprised at how much interface there is and can be on those two disparate topics. So, without any further ado, let me turn it over to John to get us going. John?
Okay. Let me, whoops. All right, is that on?
You got it.
Okay, so what is AI and will AI take over? A lot of people have asked that question. I'm going to run through a few slides, pause, turn it over to Rabbi Nichols, and then we'll come back and get a lot more into detail. But when did AI first start? Just what is it? How does it work? We've got some examples for that. We'll show you what are the concerns and then a framework to help manage it, because it does need to get managed. And some simple examples, so you're thinking about this. If you have spell check, that uses AI, dictation mode on your phone, medical, seeing more and more of that in the medical field, which I think is good in certain areas. Chat boxes, you get those, or chat bots, I should say. If you get those targeted ads, you say, gee, how did they know that? And then if you've got a fairly new car with parking assist, that's another example of AI. So AI, as Bishop said, is everywhere. How could AI destroy humanity? MIT's come out with a new robotic arm that grips based on a reflex. So you're seeing a huge gain in prosthetics. Microsoft said new AI shows some signs of human reasoning, and I sort of question that, but it's good PR. Google's got something. Would you take financial advice from AI? And chances are you already are taking financial advice from that. My weekend with AI. And then there's a MIT Tech Review devoted a whole issue to classroom or AI in the classroom and how to improve education. So that I'm going to run through this and then turn it over to Beth, and we'll come back to all the detail. But here's a little quiz. When was AI first discussed? Antiquity with myths and legends of the superintelligent. 1940s, we had the invention of the programmable digital computer. In the 50s, AI was discussed at a workshop in Dartmouth. In the 80s or early 80s, a few years after Microsoft was founded, or some people think AI started when Donald Trump sought the nomination for president. So anyway, I'm going to pause, and with that, I'll talk about how has it been made feasible, but let me turn it over to Beth. And so Rabbi Nichols can go through some things. We'll talk about what's made the change, what's the difference between where we've been and how AI became available today.
Thank you, John. I'm going to come back to that question that John just asked with perhaps a Jewish response to when was AI first discussed. But I want to first just share a couple of texts, really just demonstrate why Judaism would be in support of artificial intelligence research. I think sometimes people think that religion is about staying back with what we knew, but I want to offer two texts that show us otherwise. The first is from the Mishnah. Whoever saves one life, it is as if he has saved the entire world. And that is just kind of one example of a text showing the Jewish value of pikuach nefesh, of saving a life. And really the idea that saving a life supersedes the performance of almost any other commandment. And so doing everything that we can to be able to save a life, and with the potential of AI to be able to help lengthen our lives and save our lives in different ways. The second text here is from Maimonides. Maimonides was a medieval philosopher, but also a physician. And this is just two excerpts from his physician's prayer. You have blessed your earth, your rivers, and your mountains with healing substances. They enable your creatures to alleviate their sufferings and heal their illnesses. You have endowed us with the wisdom to relieve the suffering of his brother, to recognize his disorders, to extract the healing substances, to discover their powers, and to prepare and to apply them to suit every ill. So first, just this first piece is really saying, it's not that we should just kind of sit around and wait for God to help us, but that Maimonides is saying we have the intelligence, and there are things in creation that with our intelligence, we can figure out how to use them. And I think AI is really just, it is another example of how we're extending the technology and things that we've discovered to a new place. And then the second piece, second excerpt from his prayer, let me be contented in everything except in the great science of my profession. Never allow the thought to arise in me that I have attained to sufficient knowledge, but vouchsafe to me the strength, the leisure, and the ambition ever to extend my knowledge. For art is great, but the mind of humanity is ever expanding. So really a charge to us to always continue learning and continue creating things. But at the same time, there are cautions that I think come up with AI and really with the ethics of AI. And I would say just the same comes up anytime we discover new things. I did a science fair project in high school on the ethics of genetic testing. And the questions at the time were mostly theoretical. And now kind of all of the questions have come to a reality. So thinking about how do we set what the ethics are around something that is new. And part of that is thinking about who's responsible. So this might not sound like related to AI, but I promise it is. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox is not to be punished. If, however, the ox has been in the habit of goring, and its owner, though warned, has failed to guard it, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner too shall be put to death. So a question of who is responsible for AI? Is it the programmer? Is it the user? If we know that there's potential danger, how do we put safeguards in place to prevent those potential disasters from happening? And now to go back to John's question about when AI kind of first hit the scene. Babylonian Talmud, so we are talking about the first couple centuries, is our first reference to a golem. And I was teased today that I might be the first person to bring a stuffed animal to a Brotherhood presentation, but here is my little golem. Indeed, Rava created a man, a golem, using forces of sanctity. Rava sent his creation before Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera would speak to him, but he would not reply. Rabbi Zera said to him, "You were created by one of the members of the group, one of the sages. Return to your dust." So this is just the earliest instance of the mention of golem. It really became much more popular in medieval times, and most well known for the golem of Prague, who was created in order to save the Jews from anti-Semitism, but went out of control. And then the rabbi ended up needing to destroy him. So I think it's so similar to this fear that people have of artificial intelligence, that we're going to create a robot that, kind of takes us over, is that same fear that the golem has been causing for so long. But the questions around the golem are not just about fear of power, but are also about basic questions of what does it mean to be human. And that is more of the religious and theological question that I think brings this into a religious realm. The question of the golem raises, is it human? Can it ever be considered human? So if you destroy a golem, is that murder? Can a golem be counted toward a minion? So, if we extend that to AI, can a artificial intelligence robot ever be counted for a minion? The answer to most of these questions concerning the golem is usually no, because there's a sense that the golem doesn't have a soul, and that while it can have intelligence and be able to act, that it doesn't have a soul. It also relates to the question of free will. And this text here from the Mishnah Torah, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's basically the notion that the definition of humanity is that we have free will, that we have the ability to decide between good and bad, and that makes us, we are made in the image of God, and part of that is the ability to choose between good and evil. And I think some of the fears that AI raises is both, are we going to get to a point where we lose our free will because we've set up too many systems that are making decisions for us? Or are we, being able to define AI as not human because it can't have, it doesn't have free will in the sense of making really personal choices, right? And making kind of adding your own understanding and thought to things. This last quote here is from Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. So yet we are the only life form thus far known capable of asking the question, why? We remain what in religious language we call the image and likeness of God, which means we can choose our fate in the full dignity of responsibility, never forgetting that machines were made to serve humankind, not the other way around. And I think here, this piece of why, and being able to ask why and being able to wonder is a piece that for me makes religion and humanity kind of permanent, that AI is never going to erase that ability, because we are part of what it means to be Jewish, right, is to be able to wrestle with God and to hold in our hands and our minds contrasting opinions, and being able to have that struggle rather than kind of looking for the proper answer or the majority answer, right? Judaism is always about, let's hear what all the different possibilities are, and not necessarily coming to a conclusion. So I'm going to pause there and send it back to John for some more introductions about AI.
Okay, thank you. Let's look at, this is on now. Okay, what's made AI feasible? There are two things, hardware and software. Let's talk about hardware first. And I just jumped back to 1993 as a reference point. But if you think about the speed of processing, it was like a turtle. And then also the storage mostly was on your computer, and you'll see a little hexagon there. And that's sort of the total storage that we had in 93. Now jump ahead 30 years. What we've done with speed is that we've gone from a turtle to a jaguar or a cheetah, and also storage has gone, multiples times higher. This the graphic on the right-hand side should be probably 5 to 10 times as big as it is. So we not only got it on your personal computer, but also storage. So that's one thing. So we've seen hardware change. Software has also changed dramatically. So the base operating system is much better. There's other software programs. I mean, a major change has been large language models, which are relatively new. Faster math calculations. The math behind AI has been around. The theory's been around a long time, but the calculations are much faster. And then you've got visual recognition as well. So some intelligence, we talk about artificial intelligence, but some of the human intelligence is a result of memorizing. So let's just take some examples. Multiplication tables, we all memorized. Certain spelling, I before E, except after C, how to tie your shoes. If you've ever sailed before, Red Sky at Night, Sailor's Delight. But alphabet, you memorize the alphabet. You don't change it around. Gee, let's move S before N. No, this is the alphabet. What poison ivy looks like. And if you've ever lived in New York City, yes, you memorize all of where the different subway lines go. So anyway, that's just an example of memorizing and what's considered part of intelligence. So what I did here was to say, okay, what's the difference between human intelligence and AI? And I just use Webster. This is not some psychological definition. This is just whatever came out of the dictionary. But can you learn ability to learn to understand? Humans can learn to understand. AI at best, and I put in quotes, I don't think it really does understand. We'll see a couple of examples of that. So I was being generous to put it in quotes. Ability to deal with new or trying situations. Humans can do that. AI within a range. Can it reason? Humans, yes. AI, again, being generous to call it in quotes. Ability to apply knowledge. Humans, yes. AI, the knowledge that it has, yes, it can apply it. Understanding, humans, yes. AI has no understanding of anything. And as Beth mentioned, no soul either. So perform computer calculations, humans, yes. And AI, that's where it's great. Multiples faster than humans. So how does AI's, there's three general buckets that we'll talk about. One is a search engine or silo. Another silo is the generative AI, which you've heard a lot about, and then machine learning. But let's go through and look at a search engine. And I think everybody's used Google, Safari, whatever. So think about that. This is like Google Plus. So here you are in the middle, your computer, you type something, and then what happens, you get a question, and then it goes out and it searches libraries and media articles and research papers and blogs and other information, and it comes back. And normally with Google or Safari, you get a list of websites. Then you have to go to that website and you have to dig within that. What AI does is give you a descriptive answer. It also gives you citations. It also gives you links. It shortens it expands the search and provides a much better answer. So how do you make that work? Well, I'm going to assume this is a Microsoft example, but Safari and Google will be similar. So you get on the Microsoft search program or your web browser, Edge. Then in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little B. And so that stands for Bing. And what you do is you click on that, and that gets you into their AI program. Then you say, well, what I want to do is chat. So there's three options: chat, compose, or insights. We're going to talk about two of them. So you want to chat. So that's the third one. Then you say, well, what I want is an answer that's creative or balanced or precise. I just chose balanced. Then you type instructions. And here, I can't emphasize this enough. you need to be as specific as possible with instructions. So you've got 2,000 characters to go through, and you don't think you need them all, but type instructions in much more detail than you're used to, and you will get in much better answers. So you do all that, what happens? Well, here was one that I typed in that said, how do I know if a website is safe to visit? So you don't get just a list of things. What you get is several ways to check. McAfee, Web Advisor is one thing. Another way is privacy statement. Then you've got some links here. I'm sorry, I thought those were highlighted so you could read them a little bit better. But you just click on those links if you want. You're visiting a website, a couple more examples. You can also run a check for third party. You can try lots of different things, and you'll get a lot more comprehensive answer than what you've had in the past. So that's one thing. We can talk more about that later if you want, but now we want to do composition. And this is called generative AI, and that's in the chat, GPT, that the G part is the generative. That's what the G stands for. So let's give it an assignment. We got a little guy on the right-hand side that's going to help us compose this. So I said, let's write a letter to Governor Cooper requesting an executive order to keep the 10 Commandments out of public schools. Write anything you want, but that was what I just picked. So then you select the text format, the length, and the writing style, and then the AI goes out and access databases, and this little guy composes. So here's how you do it again. Same kind of format. Go to your edge. Click, rather than chat, you click compose. Then you type in what you want, which we talked about, Governor Cooper, yada, yada. Then you select the tone. Gee, what kind of tone? I happen to select professional, but you've got other choices as well. Casual, enthusiastic, and so forth. Format, I want a letter. You might want an email. You might want a blog post. You might want bullet points. And then how long do you want it to be? Let's make it medium. Here's what comes back. Dear Governor Cooper, I'm writing to you as a concerned citizen of North Carolina who values the separation of church and state. I urge you to issue an executive order to keep the 10 Commandments out of public schools. Then it goes on. There's a significant amount of text that's been omitted. Sincerely, and then your name. Now, I've used this. There's one of the MIT groups that I belong to that we send letters to Congress. And one of I'd agreed to, it was something on expanding the electric grid and speeding up the processing for approvals and so forth. And I'd agreed to write that letter. I thought, you know what? Let's just try AI. So I got on it. In 15 seconds, I got a letter back. And I changed, 4 or 5 words, and I sent it out. Within an hour, one of the guys said, hey, great letter. So it can really be productive if you want to use it right. But you need to know something about the topic, as we'll get into later. So here's another one. I said, all right, let's do something that you'd never do otherwise. See what happens. Create a kosher recipe from a Passover dish and a Korean dish. I mean, who'd ever put those together? So anyway, it goes through if you're looking for a way to combine Passover dish and a Korean dish and yada, yada, yada. Goes through all that. Break up the matzah in the bite-sized pieces, in the small bowl, whisk the eggs and heat this and do that. Anyway, there's your recipe right there. So whether it's any good or not, I don't know. I tried another one. They had a version of pancakes. But anyway, if you haven't used AI and you want to try it, just try some bizarre things and see what happens. And there might be some fill-ins. You might get some answers back that make no sense, but a lot of times you get some good sense. Okay, one other thing, then we'll go on a little bit more, and I'm almost finished. What is machine learning? Let's take a simple example. Here's somebody in a warehouse. They take boxes off the shelf, put them on a cart, or take boxes off a cart, put them on a shelf. That's basically the motion back and forth. So the machine learning is this, how you get there. You videotape that from a couple of different angles, And then what you do is you take that video and through it's called a multiple regression program, but what you're doing is trying to tighten it up so it's not jerky and it gets really smooth and so forth. And you use that in a computer. And then you take that program and you put it in a robot. And you tell the robot what to do. And that robot will then go to the cart, pick up the package, put it on the shelf. Now there's some sensors also involved, but that's what that robot's designed to do. And we talk about these runaway machines. As long as you tell the machine, and the machine is programmed to go from point A to point B, it doesn't go beyond point A to point B. It stays within that. And that's part of one of the issues is you controlling the scope of the machine as we go forward. How much are we going to let it make decisions versus letting us humans make decisions? So that's a simple example. And you can clearly replace a lot of manual labor that way and a lot of skilled labor on the composition side. So that's a moral question for the country. So what I did was to say, all right, let's go look at or ask the question, should jobs lost to AI tech be protected? So I went back and looked at some examples. And the precedent says no, but let's just look at a couple of examples here. On the upper left-hand side, took farm workforce as a percent of total workforce. And this happens to be back to the 1300s by various countries. The US is on here much later, but the trend line's the same. We've got more food today, it's much more productive, but the percentage of farm workers has dropped. Were they protected? No. The upper right-hand side is auto employment. I got a picture of the Model T assembly line. When I started at GM eons ago, if you compare the labor content today to when I first started, it's probably a third or less. Welding's automated, paint's automated, a lot of assembly. Were those workers protected? No. Lower left-hand side, telephone operators, secretaries. Lower right-hand side, the most recent example, or a recent example, is taxi drivers, particularly in New York. If you look at the value of the medallion, what it was, 15 years ago versus now, it's dropped like a rock. So, okay, where are we headed with all this? We can't put the chat GPT genie back in the bottle, even if it means risking extinction. OpenAI doesn't do enough to make the limitations known. Recent article in the Times, AI poses risk of extinction. Industry leaders warn. And go back to what Rabbi Nichols talked about when we're a few years ago, when we were genetics and so forth, and all the questions. Well, that's where we are. There's a lot of what ifs and a lot of vague arm waving. And so, but we can manage this if we do it right. So here's some cautions, and then I've got a proposal, and then we're finished. Okay, what are some cautions? Well, the responses of AI are not always correct. You get everything from an A+ to an F, and I've had it all. Part of that is incomplete instructions. So whenever you use AI, make sure that that you provide as complete as instructions as possible. It's like, in a way, dealing with a human. The more instructions, generally, the better off you are. The one thing that AI cannot do, it doesn't know good information from bad information. So the sources accessed in this search might have bad information in them. It does not know. And so if you have some knowledge about the topic or have a reference, I would strongly encourage you to have a reference or at least some knowledge. I've gotten stuff back and I'm going like, I know that's not right, but I made sure that I knew something about the information to begin with. And sometimes there's no clear answer to a question. Some AI programs like to fill in the gaps. I've had it come back and say, I don't know. Another issue is the impact on future education and critical thinking. We were talking before the webinar started about that. I also had other conversations with longtime friends, same kind of thing. What about are we taking away the ability for younger people to learn to think critically? And then privacy of data is a concern. Not much of your data is private right now, but some medical data is an issue. So, whoops.
All right.
Uh, oh,
Can I interrupt one
yes.
second? I
Yes.
just wanted to remind everyone that when we designed this, we wanted this to be very interactive. And certainly when Rabbi Nichols uh, conducts any kind of class or any kind of discussion, uh, she goes out of her way to stimulate conversation and make it interactive. I've worked with John on a number of topics, and John does the same. Please consider this the same setting. In your function there, on screen, there is an app on mine because I'm using my iPad. It's More, and it brings up the chat app. And if you bring up the chat app, there's right uh, in that app, there is a raise your hand. All you have to do is push that, and it will come up on the screen that so and so has a question, and then we can get to you. And if it's not working, you can wave wave to us. Madeline can see it. We perhaps can see it, and we can make it a point on calling on you to get your question in. And while we wait to aggregate a question, John, let me just go back and ask a question to make sure I've got this right. You said at the beginning, AI does not understand. Humans understand, but AI does not understand. This is in the context of what you just said a few minutes ago of AI at this point, even though it is generative and it is learning as it goes, it is not able to initially discern good information from bad information.
Right.
Is that the context of it
Right.
doesn't understand?
Yeah. And it doesn't, yeah, we talk about the moral issue here. It doesn't understand what's moral and not moral. It's just responding to the program. That's all.
Okay.
So, yeah. So this is my last slide. Okay. So how do we manage AI going forward? I mean, can we put a roadmap together for this? And wait a minute, this is a skeleton of what needs to get done, but there's some encouraging news here. So let's just go on the upper left-hand side. And I think the federal government needs to be the location for this. And so we need federal government, we need the tech industry and other industry too. We need academia involved. We need the public involved. And that could be a number of things, general public, and then various religious institutions and so forth, but just general public. And those groups need to get together and sort of build a roadmap for solutions, practical solutions to manage AI. But this is not just a US problem. It's obviously an international problem. So once we get our act together, or as part of getting our act together, we need to work with foreign governments as well. So if we look at the stair step, so you create the agency, and I know some people say we don't need another government agency, but I'll give you some examples on how do we address climate change, and frankly, there's no solution otherwise. But you create an agency, you establish some guardrails on what's reasonable content, what's the range that you allow AI to operate in, what's a timeline to comply with these guidelines or guardrails. Then you implement the guidelines, and then you begin to monitor and enforce them. And the model that I sort of referenced here is NATO and how that works. On the positive side, at least to start for this, and I don't know where it's going to end up, but in the fall of this year, in the UK, there's a global AI conference on trying to begin to address this. So at least that's getting started. I don't know to what extent all the tech companies are going to participate, but some of them have been totally irresponsible in their approach to this. Others, in terms of platform management, others have been better, but at least something's getting started. So with that, AI is this both great opportunity and a great challenge. And so we got some people on one side saying, don't worry about it, the old Alfred E. Newman. And other people are going about, we're going to ruin the world here. So it's we, and that's collective we, really as a society need to manage this. And so with that, thanks for the time, and I'm glad to chat some more. And, this is a big topic with a lot of variables in it. So thank you.
Rabbi Nichols, John's covered a lot of territory. Is there something that you heard that you would like to expound upon?
I just want to make one point about the question of that John said that the AI doesn't know what's moral. And I think a challenge of that is that when we then have an opportunity with something that uses AI to program in morality, the question then becomes, whose morality is it, and who's making decisions? For autonomous cars, who is programming which decisions a car makes about getting in an accident? Because depending on who you speak with, you might get different answers about how individual humans would make the decision if they could choose life or death for somebody or for a group. So if we're then programming that into artificial intelligence, who gets to make those decisions? I read some article wondering, could you order it that it was with a Jewish morality? Well, that seems like a hard thing to think about can we program something like that? So that's the one thing that I wanted to add. And then we'll turn to questions. Thanks, Bishop.
Okay, thank you. One of the comments in the chat box came from Harry Sparks. I think it was a very pithy comment. We were talking about AI doesn't understand, and Harry said, "Yeah, well, I'll let Harry pose it." Harry, we're going to get you unmuted. Make sure that you on your control is unmuted. You're unmuted now, Harry. What was the point you raised?
Well, it just seems to me that there are a lot of humans who also don't understand morality. And to add to the point, at one point John was talking about critical thinking. I fear that a lot of young people already are not being trained and not learning how to do critical thinking. But also just, when you think about people who don't understand morality, and you start wondering about how that's all going to get programmed into an AI operation, it's a little bit scary.
It is. So let me ask you, if AI is so new, we've heard a lot of positive, we've heard a lot of negative. We're all moving up the learning curve, but based on what you've heard so far, are you more optimistic or more pessimistic about AI going forward?
I'm basically optimistic. I think some of the benefits John talked about can be really useful, although I also have this belief that pretty much any tool, once it's implemented well, can be abused. And I think that's going to be a possibility with AI. You can think about a lot of tools that do some good things, but then also wind up doing bad things because people use them for things that they weren't designed for, or get carried away with it and take it to an extreme that's not good.
All right, net, you are biased going, let's say you're going long, you're a little more positive. And I want to get to Judy Glazer's comment in a second. But also we'd like to hear from someone who's going short, who says, well, net, I'm not as positive, I'm more pessimistic. Let's go to Judy Glazer. Judy has a comment that I think is more than worth sharing. Judy, make sure your mic is not muted, and please share with everyone your comment.
Okay. I don't actually see my comment. Hold on a second. Why don't you just read it? Can you see it?
Yes, I can bring that up for you in 1 second. Judy said, given that AI has been created so far by nerdy, young, white males, it is already spewing out their insecurities and hatreds, anti-female, anti-Jewish, anti-Arab, pro-Asian, pro-white, etc. It covers the gamut. This is already embedded into the programming. How do we address this? That's a good question. So I'm not sure we have a ready-made answer, but this is the interactivity of human beings. Whether you're just at a party having discussion or in a Gestalt encounter group, there's lots of different strong opinions being expressed all the time. The internet has put that human nature aspect on steroids. So we hear lots and lots of cacophony of different strong opinions. And I'm not sure we figured out how to address that either for anyone who has used social media. Let's go to Janice, who had her hand up.
Well, may I make a comment on that, please?
Yes,
Because I don't think there's two levels here. And one, if in terms of searching the internet and coming back with information, the program, unless it's written to be biased, and I'm not saying it's not, but if it's an objective program, will go out and again, take the instructions that we talked about. The more specific the instructions, the better off your answer will be, because that helps the program sort out data. But it goes out on the internet and gets all this data, it comes back, synthesizes it, and provides an answer. So, and it'd be an interesting experiment to go and try the phraseology one way that's sort of open or maybe biased or anti-Semitic and see what happens. And then go out and take the same question worded slightly differently and then see what kind of answer you get. That's on that's on the sort of, chat side. Now, what I didn't talk about on the compose side is how you can use this to your advantage. You can take documents. For example, Beth might have a Torah study class, and you can take that and post it, upload that into the program, the chat program, and then ask for a summary. And bingo, like that, you get a summary. If you use Zoom and you have a meeting, you can record a meeting and then it'll transcribe that and upload that transcription into an AI program. And now you've got a summary of the meeting. So there's a lot of things other than what we talked about. I really didn't cover all that, but there's a lot of other benefit. In terms of the bias, though, and the program, that's more going out to the internet and getting information back So I would encourage you to try the same question phrased slightly differently and see what the different answers you get and how, if they're biased or not biased. But
You
your
know,
point's well
polls-
taken. Your point's well taken.
Pollsters have that all the time. They'll ask a question and they'll just vary it very slightly and get a whole different array of answers, qualitatively and quantitatively. So I think when AI does that in a slight variation, it's a very human characteristic. I mentioned before that Judy Glazer had her hand up. Judy, are you still with us?
Janice Nathanson has had her hand up. So I'm not sure how relevant my comment is at this point, but it was before Rabbi Nichols even spoke, but it has to do with the government agencies of different countries and NATO and et cetera, making these recommendations for controlling artificial intelligence. Well, that's only as good as the people who are in the charge of the governments. You take people like North Korea or Putin or various other people, they're going to only follow their moral guidelines, which are definitely not up to our moral guidelines. And that's not going to do very much good to have those things in place. It was my point, and I think my husband had it.
I'd like to say we've been using AI for many years in the military and government as threat assessments. And all it takes is one mislabeled step or program, and it's a disaster. It doesn't take a lot. That's all I've got to say.
Well, yeah, I used AI in the early 80s. And but it's all back to it's the garbage in, garbage out thing, and, or, sort of moral input. And how do you control it? And it's the same problem we have with climate change. I mean, it's a worldwide problem, and some people have different standards. So how do we manage that?
Well, it's not a case of morals necessarily. It's a case of accuracy. Your morals may have nothing to do with it.
Well,
you may have best intentions in the world, and if you put in a bad character in this huge program, you can have unintended consequences. Is all I'm saying. It's not up to morality; it's up to accuracy and everything else, and you can't control that.
Well, it's up to both things, morality and accuracy.
Yeah,
Right.
I was not. I misunderstood what you were saying about the data management side. Yes. Okay.
Before I was teasing Harry that he was going net long on AI. And it sounds like net you're going short on AI being a net positive for humanity. I don't know if we're not gonna have an answer until we go, time will tell deeper into this and see how AI is adapted and used. But your point about malevolent usage is well taken. We know that with an election coming up, we're going to see a lot more deep fakes and misinformation coming from the Putins and China and North Korea and anyone else with a different kind of agenda. I mean, that's not going to be a shock. Harry, I think you had another comment.
So back in the old days when I was lecturing about computer security and computer things, John talked about garbage in, garbage out, but the real problem was that you got garbage in and you got gospel out because people believed it. It came out of the computer. It must be right. So
it's a problem.
That's a real issue. If you don't know what's going in, something comes out and you're ready to believe it because, my God, it was our great AI program, and that can be an issue as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Harry. I mean, and that's one of the concerns is that people are going to give over or relinquish their authority to a computer. And so that's a big risk. That's a critical thinking part, though, too.
Right.
Yes.
Joel, you have your hand up? It looked like you were ready to make another comment. No? Okay. So in your presentation, John, you've shown we've been using what we call AI or generative learning for decades, and in different ways, from anything as simple as spell check to Netflix giving us recommendations for what we want to watch based on our past programming, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we've all gotten pretty used to that. So why is it that there's so much hand wringing about using AI going forward? Doesn't our past suggest that we can learn to adapt and to use it as a tool going forward? Is that too Pollyanna of an outlook? Anyone?
You waiting for
Yeah.
anybody to talk or just?
Yeah, anybody or John,
Okay.
while we wait for hands to be
And
raised.
Howard has his hand up.
Yeah, not to
Say
answer
that-
Bishop's question, I'll ballpark your question. I want to get to another area of our lives where AI could be used. By the way, just as an aside, in case you haven't figured out, Bishop has been using a lot of football analogies, going short, going long, faking. The Jewish quarterback in me can't help but come out and think about that. Thank you, Bishop. Appreciate that. John and Rabbi Nichols, you brought up Maimonides and just looking into the healthcare field and the use of AI for both medical and surgical. Just by example, medicine, perhaps using AI where physicians, not the healthcare professionals, can try to work out a differential diagnosis for a patient case. Surgery, I know my son's a facial plastic surgeon and ENT. He has done robotic surgery, and I'm sure that AI is worked into that, and I've talked to him a lot about it. He says he controls the machine, but the machine obviously is doing some work that his hands could have been doing. So it's just really fascinating, and I'm assuming that artificial intelligence is playing a role in some of these important areas of healthcare, and then who's controlling that ultimately? Is it the human being or the machine?
Yeah. Well, the Da Vinci surgery, I don't know if he uses Da Vinci or something else, but literally that's sort of semi-robotic, and that'll get better over time. But I'll give you an example. I was talking to a longtime friend of mine last week, and she'd been to the doctor, and they were trying to tell her she had TB and that she had something else and something else. And so they couldn't figure out what was wrong. And she'd had I think an MRI. And so if you think about this huge database that's out there now that the medical profession can tap into, there's likely other people in the country or worldwide with the same set of symptoms. And so if you can tap into that and at least find those people, that helps the doctor then provide the diagnosis, or at least get a better understanding of what the diagnosis ought to be. So I think that's the great part of it. And that can apply to a lot of areas. So that's a very positive side.
Yeah, I just saw a piece on NBC News the other night. Agriculture is already using AI in so many positive ways to increase the yield and to be environmentally responsible in the way it harvests nature. extremely positive. And I think the same way as Howard just talked about in medicine. And I think we can go on and on. Rabbi Nichols, the spiritual community and clergy, not just Jewish clergy, but interfaith clergy. And I know that you talk among a lot of clergy from Jewish and non-Jewish. Is there any preliminary sense or opinions about AI at this point?
I haven't had the conversation in an interfaith group, but looking in preparation for tonight, looking over some articles, some Jewish articles on it, I think there's a sense of it can be useful, but it can also never replace the ability to what John talked about with understanding and I think creativity that AI will never be able to have in the same way as humans do. Will always make there still be a place for spirituality and religion. I think also the relationship piece. Even if you think about pastoral care, that there will be certain things that that you can sense, that I can sense, that there's an underlying question to what somebody is saying, whereas AI is going to only hear the question, and that human intuition and is able to see something deeper. And I think that will leave a place for it. One of the fears that I have is and the same as that came out with fears about widespread use of search engines, is what kind of information people are getting. That if people start to, for example, only turn to AI for information about Judaism, it only can rely on the information that's already out there. And there is oodles of more information from the Orthodox world than there is from the Reform world. And so how is that limiting what people are assuming is true? But I did see an article by an Orthodox rabbi also that said, even with AI might be helpful for, am I allowed to do this or this? But that even in the Orthodox community, there's an acknowledgement that it is always dependent on the specific situation, that you're supposed to go ask your rabbi because your rabbi knows the law, but also then can hear all the specifics of your circumstance. And that level of nuance, I think, is AI is a long way from getting to.
And that goes right back to what John was saying before about, and I emphasized it, about AI doesn't understand anything. It doesn't understand good information, bad information, and when it comes to morality, that's a whole other degree of that AI is not equipped to begin to approach. So I don't think that the rabbis of the world are going to have to fear about job dependency and longevity due to being displaced by AI. I think that seems evident right now. That's very, very, very far off, if ever, for AI to gap over into that area.
But I also think we have to leave space to say, let's wait and see, because if we think about just a few years ago, before COVID, the idea that we were going to find community online, or that people would be able to pray online, would have been kind of ludicrous. And now it's not only when we need to do it, but it's also how can we expand our reach, and how can people be engaged in new ways because of technology. So I think there always has to be that room for let's wait and see, and be kind of cautious and know that we're going to need to put in regulations, but also be curious about what might result.
Right. On my screen, and I think it's fresh, I see another hand up from Judy Glazer. Is that correct?
Yeah, I had two comments. One is, I think several people have said it, that AI its really strong point is crunching a whole lot of data. I mean, that's what computers are good at. And so what AI is basically doing is going out and looking at masses of data that's way beyond what any of us could grapple with, whatever the topic is, and trying to come back with a consensus of, here's what's out there. And what I think we're all saying is that has to be matched with some level of humility, that is only what's out there. That doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean that this is the last word, that, we still have way more things to learn. This is, both for what comes back and for the users. I mean, I think most of us with any sense realize you Google things and you come up with some stuff that's useful and some stuff that's just crap, and that's what's out there. And we acknowledge that, but AI has a little more authority to it. And we've got to build into that something that keeps reminding us it actually doesn't know. It's just crunching a whole lot of data. But the second thing that I wanted to just bring up, and this comes more from the realm of science fiction. Science fiction is absolutely full of robots and computers that become self-aware. And but I've read some things about machines approaching that. They are capable at some level of thinking deeper questions and have some self-awareness. And we're only at the very beginning of all of this. So it doesn't seem to me impossible that we keep saying they don't understand. I think they could. I think we get to the point where, a computer brain sees itself really as a different species.